When you're choosing a fund, it seems logical to pick one that's performed well recently. The fund management industry knows performance is its most powerful selling tool. But what if the funds at the top of the league tables today are no more likely to stay there than anyone else? Professor Tonks has spent years studying this question. He starts with a simple classroom experiment.
Suppose I've got 100 students in the room. I get them all to stand up, right? So I get 100 students to get off their backsides and they stand up. And then they get a coin out of their pocket and I ask them to toss the coin. And then I say, everybody that's tossed the tails, they sit down. And that means about 50 people are still standing, 50 people have sat down. And I get the people who are standing to toss another coin. That's the same coin again. And again, about 50% of the people will sit down. And now we're down to 25 people standing. If I do that 6 times, I end up with 2 or 3 people still standing, right? And then I stop the game at this point because there's too much now randomness in it. But I then ask everybody in the lecture theatre to applaud those 3 people because they have this fantastic skill. They can toss 6 heads in a row, right? What an amazing skill.
It's a memorable image, but it raises a serious question about real-world fund management. If you look at a fund with a stellar 5-year track record, how do you know you're looking at genuine skill and not just the equivalent of flipping 5 heads in a row?
The point of that story is to say, well, of course, in any distribution, you're going to get some winners and you're going to get some losers. The question is whether the winners can keep winning, can keep outperforming. But in general, tests that have looked at the persistence of fund performance typically find that those fund managers that do well over a period of time subsequently underperform, and fund managers that underperform initially subsequently outperform. So there's a kind of a reversion to the mean. So everybody comes back to the mean again, and the mean is essentially on average slight underperformance.
So the winners fade, the losers recover, and almost everyone drifts back to the average, which after fees means slight underperformance. But why does this keep happening? What's the mechanism?
Mean reversion in fund performance is to do with fund flows. So funds that have done very well in the past attract lots of investor interest, and investors start putting money into those funds. And the problem is that these funds then get bigger, and whatever the strategy was of this fund, it's difficult to keep up with that strategy as you've got more funds under management. So there's this inherent tendency to revert to the mean in terms of your fund performance because you've now got more funds that you're managing.
In other words, success contains the seeds of its own failure. Money pours in, the fund gets too big, and the strategy stops working. It's a pattern we've seen play out many times. The demise of UK fund manager Neil Woodford is a classic example.
What really went wrong with Neil Woodford is, although I think he had a fund that was regarded as an income fund, and we normally think of an income fund as being relatively safe, so investing in high dividend yield stocks, which is what generates the income for the fund. He started experimenting in order to try and boost his returns in more esoteric companies, and in fact some of those companies were relatively illiquid investments, and he really came unstuck. I mean, in a way he'd already become unstuck, and he just compounded the issue further, really trying to rescue his performance, but then ultimately it all went pear-shaped.
It's a cautionary tale, but the lesson applies far beyond one fund manager. Chasing past performance feels rational, but the evidence says it's one of the most reliable ways to be disappointed. A better approach: choose a low-cost, diversified fund or portfolio of funds and stay patient.